MNSWSDC 2022. My name is Bea. I go by she and her pronouns, and I have the honor of chairing this round. However, I do recommend that you refer to the panel as a whole. I'd also encourage the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves in the order that it shows up on tab. Starting off with Anga.
All right. Hi, everyone. Congratulations to proceed to the grand final. My name is Anga. I'll be your panel for this round. Best of luck for everyone.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on the time zone you are watching this final from. My name is Panchiro Catalina, and I'm going to be one of today's panelists for this grand final.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I will be paneling alongside the rest of the panel. I go by he, him pronouns.
Hi, everyone. I'm Himrim panelist for this round. Preferred pronouns they, them. Panel,
Great, thanks so much. Just note, it's consent to being recorded. The same goes for you. I'd also encourage you to introduce themselves, starting for the proposition team, please. First prop, please start.
Sorry.
Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Zoe. My preferred gender pronouns are she/her.
Hi, my name is Uma. I use he, him pronouns, and I'll take POIs in the chat.
Hi, I'm the whip. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll take POIs verbally.
Great, thanks so much to the prop team. Now calling on the op team for introductions as well, please.
Hello, my name is Sean, and I go by any pronouns. I will be going as the first speaker.
Hi, my name is Supei. I go by she, her, they, them pronouns. I prefer PRs in the chat unless at the 6th minute. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yushan. I'll be the third speaker, and I go by she, her pronouns.
Spectacular. Thank you so much again to both teams. And again, congratulations to making it to the final. Just last thing before we start, first on timing, I'll send timestamps for 1, 7, 8, and 8:15 in the chat. But I also encourage the teams to please time yourselves. Second, I believe everyone should be aware, POIs, 15 seconds only between 1 and 7. If there are any issues with connections, do let us know. But ideally, please turn on your camera when you're speaking. Otherwise, it's primarily it, calling on the Yes. Before that, of course, for the observers, please make sure to turn off your video and to turn off your audio if you, in all cases, because you're not expecting you to speak. For the teams, please let us know if you do not consent to anyone being in the room for observers or if you do not consent to recording before the start of the speech. Broadly, that is it. In any case, calling on the first proposition speaker to start us off, you're here.
Am I audible?
Hi, yes, you are audible.
Okay, if there's no response, I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. The process of settling with your one true love and staying with only one singular person will be an impossible obligation for a young person who believes in the proximity principle. There are 2 things in my speech. The first is the setup, followed by 2 arguments that I would like to bring to the debate. Let's start with the setup. First of all, this individual has knowledge of the proximity principle and believes in it. This individual's belief in the proximity principle meant that it becomes something they think about when interacting with other people. At the very least, this proximity has a strong influence on shaping their worldview and shaping their interactions with other people, especially when entering relationships. This individual does not selectively choose when to apply the proximity principle. It has a permanent effect on their approach to social interpretations. It is embedded in their minds when they are making decisions. This has become part of their ability to function as a person. Next, this debate is uniquely about what the person ought to do up to age 30. I want to answer a very important question here. Why is it that an individual's choice up to age 30 is very important? The first reason is that before the age of 30, you're generally going to be in a constantly fluctuating environment. Moreover, you're likely to lack the maturity and knowledge to deal with this in a reinforced and healthy manner. For the majority of people, you will gain greater stability after the age of 30, when you have less change in your life, more assurance of who you are as a person, more stable relationships and long-term friends, and a greater freedom to do what you want. Your life conditions do not evolve and change as much as they once did once you reach the age of 30. We would be fine with the individual committing to other relationships such as close friends, families, given that familial or friend bonds do not operate on exclusivity. Moving on to the two main arguments today. The premise of this argument is that the proximity principle means that people end up forming new relationships with individuals who are located near them. For someone who is aged 30 and under, they meet a large volume of people all the time. This can be seen in them constantly meeting new people in high school, in university, when they start working, or in social settings such as playing sports at the football club or going for a drink at the bar. Let's take an example. If someone were to commit to a long-term relationship, but the proximity principle states that the individual eventually develops an interpersonal relationship with those around them, they feel that they may eventually hurt the person who they once cared for and once had feelings. Once new feelings emerge for individuals who are of closer proximity to them. The individual believes that it is true that they will form relationships with those closer to them in the future. This personal belief means that the individual will want to refrain from committing to someone before the age of 30, as this belief is deep-rooted and signifies the chance of finding a new partner. They understand that the conditions around them will continuously change. They understand what is happening around them. So they would want to wait for the opportunity to find the right person. Should they believe in this, they would not want to commit to someone only to develop feelings for someone else and hurt the feelings of the initial partner once emotions develop. This belief becomes a moral judgment because the individual would want to avoid hurting the feelings of the initial person. Next, we would like to bring up the fact of how relationships can reduce choice. The proximity principle states that since there are so many people you can meet and form relationships with, there's zero assurance as to who will be the one for you. Hence, knowing this, we would prefer not to conform to the societal narrative that you need a relationship in order to achieve happiness. There are two structural problems with conventional romantic relationships that make it incompatible with the proximity principle. First is the idea of intensity. In a long-term romantic relationship, you must dedicate yourself to the person and input your utmost commitment to the sustainability of that relationship. This limits your ability to do other things because you absolutely need to devote more of your time to this person in order for the relationship to work. You need to sacrifice things like maybe your time for going on this date. You need to make compromises in your lifestyle in order to make the other person happier. You need to accommodate to what makes them happy as well. Next is the idea of exclusivity. Because you are told that you have to prioritize this romantic relationship over anything else, and it's such an important commitment, you will prioritize it over other relationships. Hence, even when your everyday connections are confronted by the proximity principle, you feel less fulfilled because you are unable to strengthen your connections with these individuals as a result of needing to prioritize your romantic relationship. It is because of these reasons that we say relationships are something that limits your self-actualization, especially at a young age, which moves me onto my second argument on why choosing to pursue romance becomes an incredibly arduous process. The second argument is that the process of searching for a romantic partner and staying in a romantic relationships become incredibly difficult and stressful. This can be broken down into several layers. The first is that because of the proximity principle, you know that many people around you will start to develop an interpersonal relationship with you. If you are so eager to find someone in society, it makes it extremely difficult to be able to self-actualize and find what is most important to you. They may feel that they have the burden of carrying the relationship and are confined to the views of their partner. This may stop them from being able to focus on the few things that should remain their top priority as young adults enter the age where major decisions are being made, such as deciding on what they want to work as, their occupation, what means most to them, and piling romantic relationship onto these taxing enough tasks can be a burden. When you date someone, to a certain extent of your emotions become interconnected with the other person. So you have to share the burden of their negative emotions like sadness or anger.
Verification.
Now, if the person already understands the theory of proximity, why would they want to waste their efforts and time on a relationship that they predict cannot last? There's no justification as to why young adults should be committing to long-term relationships and taking on the burden of relationships if they believe otherwise, that they are likely to move on to another partner as their environment changes, as their surrounding changes, as the conditions around them change. My next layer that I would like to add on is the resentment against your partner. You feel like you're being forced and tied down by relationships despite the individual's belief that they are likely to find someone else following the theory of proximity. And this develops into resentment over time. This is particularly prevalent when the other person has no such knowledge of the proximity principle, and thus they want things like personalized affection, where they want to spend time with you. You see them as being restricting and controlling. You start to develop the thought that the person is holding you back from what matters to the individual and being stuck in a relationship that no longer matters. This cannot possibly be justified as a healthy relationship, and you end up hurting the individual who you decided to commit to too early in life, presuming that this individual will find a new partner because it is what they believe in. They believe in the theory of proximity. They believe that they will form interpersonal relationships with those who are close in proximity. And before the age of 30, it is likely that these individuals will be shifting. People are finding themselves, they are moving to different parts of the world, maybe to find jobs. All these changes leads to a point where they are likely to find a new partner following their own principle. If this individual being discussed so wholeheartedly believes in this principle, they are likely to develop a new relationship. Then why would they want to put themselves through the feeling of resentment, the difficulty to self-actualize, and the myriad of drawbacks that emerge as a result of committing to a relationship so early on in life? Therefore, we have proved a few things. The process of searching for romantic relationships will be a terrible and difficult process, and the only way to make this better is to quit the pursuit of romantic entirely under the age of 30. And in the absence of pursuing one person, you have far more agency in developing new relations that can bring you far more happiness in life. With that, I propose. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much to the first proposition speaker for a very fine speech. Now inviting the first opposition speaker to open up the op case. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
you're audible.
Okay, thank you. So before I start my speech, I'd like to clarify QI through voice. So if you have a QI, please just feel free to unmute and just ask me. And yeah, just give me a second. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So under today's debate, before we get into any setup or anything like that, we have to understand that on government side, they still will be able to push for casual relationships to an extent. They will still be able to have like casual relationships under this situation, or else under this like what they are proposing is that they are against relationships as a whole. However, to understand that there is still some potential room for that instead. And okay, now I'm going to move on to my setup. So first of all, we have to understand what this proximity principle necessarily means. So it still occurs after the year 30, you still might end up hurting people in the long run as well. And proximity people is basically having interpersonal relationships with those that are close to you. It doesn't just simply mean that you'll fall in love with someone just because you're close. And besides just that, young adults are those that are the age group between 18 to 29. And these people, given this debate, they are going to be actively refraining from committing to these relationships. But that does not mean you don't have to convince yourself to not commit, even if you wanted to, until the age of 30. So what this means is that on both sides, you're likely to fall in love with people who are close to you. So what this means is that under this situation, what this means is because you've already known each other for some time and you already had interpersonal relationships, you already have a mutual understanding with each other to a certain extent, even before forming a relationship. And yeah, you will fall in love regardless, even before 30, and you will still be sad trying to restrain yourself from and setting up all these like personal boundaries for like a simple fact that you're afraid of causing sadness simply because of your own immaturity. And moving on, Long-term relationships are basically planning for the future as well as working out issues with the hopes of resolving them among you and your spouse. Whereas a short-term relationship, it has an expectation where you'll end soon and it's probably more casual. So under this situation, what this means is that committing to this will end up committing to these relationships, assuming that your crush or lover wants it, would agree to commit to this long-term relationship as well. And this debate is not about whether or not you would seek for a relationship or not, but about whether or not you would actively want to refrain from committing or not. So proposition has to defend only finding short-term relationships until the age of 30, whereas we on our side will still have the active choice and a wider range of options to explore to either want short-term or long-term relationships in the long run. So with this, we are able to defend a societal norm where people engage in long-term relationships as well whenever they feel like it. So this means that they can just kick it up whenever they feel like they're ready. And why this is important is that people before 30 are also able to make rational decisions. It doesn't just mean that once you hit 30 and like a random switch just flicks and you're already matured, but there is a lot more nuance to it, and you're already at the working age even before that. And like under that scenario, you can assume to be matured as well. And our burden is that a wider range of options will actively bring more benefit than harm. And there's no point in actively restraining yourself under this situation in the long run anyways, because you're only going to hurt yourself even more. So first argument, falling in love in itself is already something that is going to be inevitable. The premise is that some people might already want long-term relationships before that set age, simply because it's a societal norm and people want to have that sense of security to try and achieve a home and have a partner where they will actually love you for a long term. It is in our human nature to want to find a sense of belonging, to curb your own loneliness, or to have someone to depend on the long term. And besides just that, there are also a lot of factors like hormones and also peer pressure, which also makes you more inclined to do so in order to fit or find your own happiness. So why is this important? The impact is that what happens on your side is that you're likely to actively reject long-term relationships. And this means that you're going to lose a lot of options, because like you're going to lose options of partners who want to have long-term relationships. And what this means is that you're likely to make your like under this situation, we on our side are able to make this decision on a case-to-case basis. We won't have to wait until 30 to be able to have the virtue of choice. And besides just that, in conclusion, you're still going to fall in love either way. So when this is the case, how are you going to act on it? You will still end up getting hurt compared to on our side, where we are able to at least pursue that choice. And what this means is that you argue about self-actualization, where in reality, you are causing a perverse effect where you are directly curbing your own self-actualization and you're harming your own ability to do so, which is only going to end up causing more issues in the future, simply because you won't have that form of courage. You're going to be sad. So when that is the case, it's an assault on human liberty in itself, and you also lose your access to self-actualization in the long run. So number two, why is missing out on 10 years of seeking long-term relationships inherently bad on itself? This is one of the best times for you to search for long-term relationships. And under this scenario, right, the time where you need, so this is the time where people decide to settle down and they need support the most to find certainty and seek validation when you are exploring this world. So before just 30, right, you have a lot more time to contribute. You have a lot more time to actually interact and form like solid bonds with your partner. But at the age of 30, you're oftentimes occupied with your jobs. You're oftentimes occupied with work as well. And at that rate, to try and explore is going to be a huge hurdle in itself, simply because you lose that initial creativity that you could have had in the first place. And the best time to explore, which is before just like before 30 in itself. So why is this bad? This is because restraining yourself and not acting on your feelings is going to cause you to be uncertain of your partner's feelings. Thus, there's a possibility that your partner is unable to wait till the age of 30 as well under this scenario. Given that short-term relationships are still going to be possible, then what this means is that like your partner might not end up staying with you in the long run with you, simply because like they might end up choose to leave you. And under this scenario, right, you will end up just living in regret, simply because you just missed out on your chance, just because you actively chose to not act on your feelings because of that fear of emotional maturity, which is something that we already tackled, and it might not even happen or be that likely of a scenario to occur, simply because maturity isn't defined by age, it's defined by your experience, and experience isn't defined by age either. It's defined by how you decide to approach things in the long run. So moving on, I'm going to touch on this third argument as well. You're able to have better relationships simply because you have more freedom to explore. You can end up building more meaningful relationships that can be built over time, and your relationship is likely to last even longer in the future. And with this, you are going to be more likely to work hard in this relationship because you expect it to be long-term as well, and you can actively build towards it. And when this is the case, even if in the worst case scenario where you don't get to be in a long-term relationship with them, we say that this experience of being able to understand what the partner wants in itself is something that is exclusive to our side. It's not something that you can get on your side, simply because you have the fear of even exploring and even trying to give that one shot in the first place. And when this is the case, it's only going to end up harming yourself even more, because you're curbing your own social interactions just because of this one fear that in itself is very invalid and irrational. And what we have brought to you on our side is basically what we are able to do is that, since falling in love is already inevitable, we on our side are able to ensure that you are brave enough to go for that process. We are able to gain self-actualization even faster. And even on our worst case scenario, we still are able to gain that experience in the long term. And number three, we don't want to just waste 10 years out of this fear of that fear, simply because seeking out long-term relationships requires that time. And we say the earlier you start, the better, which is why we say you should side with opposition. And with that, I end my speech. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much to the first opposition speaker for a very fine speech. Now inviting the second proposition speaker to extend the case for Prop Bench. Here.
All right, am I audible?
Hi, yes, you're audible and visible.
All right, nice. Take POIs in each chat. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Love may be a powerful emotion, but as some of you know, I, out of anyone in this room, uniquely understand the mental anguish when the person you treasured most ends up leaving you for someone new. I want to note here very simply that this debate was about the interest of this particular actor, not society at large. What we required from opposition was an account of why this particular individual will make good choices regarding this relationship, why they will not fail in doing so, and why prioritizing one romantic lover to the exclusion of other friends was a just choice to make in this debate. They lost because their infatuation with the notion of their romance and their ignorance of other avenues of self-actualization condemned them to the loss in these finals. There are 3 rebuttals I want to make clear at the top of this speech. First, on that, you will enter romantic relationships anyway, because things like hormones and social norms coerce you to enter romantic relationships on either side. So the first thing is that social norms do not universally affect every single person to the same degree, which is why even if there are capitalist norms that push people towards certain job fields, you are still able to opt out that depending on your life experiences and the preferences that you have as a person, which means that if you have the proximity principle as one of your guiding philosophical norms, and that is also able to make you want to deprioritize the norm that you have to enter romantic relationships as a utmost goal in life, because you're able to reject this as something that's key towards your self-actualization. Second, they say you're going to be able to enter casual relationships, but the reason as to why this ties back once again is that you can choose to fall in love, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to enter in a long-term relationship, which means that, as the proximity principle says, the more you interact with someone, you may fall in love with them. Our argument here was that even if you fall in love with them, it was far better for you to reject that relationship now rather than having to face all of the harms of rejecting them in the future, when all of the emotional attachments would otherwise have compounded under the side of opposition. So if it was true that this person had lots of interpersonal in their life, it was far better for you to make the choice to reject this now rather than in the future when the emotional attachment compounds due to all of the rhetoric that first op says. If it's true that this person is so special, if it's true that this person is so important towards you, that is why we ought to reject them now rather than in the future. Second, what if this person has initial regret and thinks about, what if I didn't end up getting with that guy from sixth form? It ends up becoming far better in a world where you chose to pursue the romantic relationship. So it's obviously true here. Neither side is able to make homogeneous characterizations of whether the romantic relationship will fail or succeed in all instances. What we're able to demonstrate is that these romantic relationships have core tenets that cannot be substituted, which is the idea of exclusivity and the idea of intensity, which received no response, which is why particularly romantic relationships ought not to be the type of relationship you pursue. in this debate. The second thing I want to talk about here under the rebuttal is it's not particularly proven as to why romantic relationships have to be the utmost priority of this person. So it's true, maybe some romantic relationships allow you to understand the person on a deeper level, for you to call them every night and FaceTime them and see them in their darkest times as well. The difference here was that it was not clear why this couldn't be substituted by normal friends. And the reason as to why there was a trade-off was because of the material that first prop talks about that went completely unresponded to. The third reason as to why this can't work is assuming that romantic relationships were going to play the primary goal in your life. What we're able to prove here is that your proximity principle it guides you in the way that is subconscious, which means that you aren't able to actively look at the proximity principle and say, I'm going to be choosing who my friends are, but the constant knowledge on your mind, knowing that at any time you may fall in love with someone else, at any time that this person is not a person of permanence, means you ought to prioritize other relationships as well instead of this particular person. I'm going to talk about 3 issues in this speech then. First, on this particular long-term romantic relationship, will it succeed or will it fail? The first reason we talked about why this will fail is because this person has specific needs and wants that are different from what society prioritizes. So all their analysis about why romantic relationships are good are still not nuanced to this actor. We explain that in the light of them knowing about the proximity principle, they're going to prioritize other things. And the second is that the constant knowledge that this person face them other things that's going to be good for them as well when they know that romantic relationships are not going to be good for them. But I want to note here why romantic relationships are not to be an argument that are weighed highly in this debate. First is on they failed to do the weighing. We explained that this particular actor does not have romance on the top of their priorities. But second, there was no positive thing to gain from the fallout of a romantic relationship. So even though this may be taking them at their worst, the reason why we told you they were likely to fail is because of the thought process of this person. It's uniquely different from everyone else in societies who's subject to romance. How about the process of breaking up teaching you life lessons? Maybe there's something to gain at the end of the day, some lesson to be learned. But the reason why this is true is, for example, if you're someone who wants to climb Mount Everest and learn from that failure as an average person, that is fine. But if you're someone like myself who is physically unfit and not very strong, then setting yourself up for a scenario where you're disproportionately more likely to fail and suffer isn't something that you want to do. So you with the knowledge that other people may be primary goals in your life as well, the knowledge that other people you meet at work or at the club may also become people you get attached to, means that you ought not to prioritize this because you may know that the chance of harm is so much greater than the chance of benefit. They still have yet to prove why romantic relationships was an on-net good, and the reason we say this wasn't true is because they were founded on the premises of exclusivity and intensity. The other side claims you will work to improve the relationship because you don't want the partner to go away. The problem with this statement is we prove to you as to why this leads to more resentment, because you know that you believe that this principle is the guiding light for all social interactions and your worldview is shaped off that. So you know that this person is going to come at your cost, which is why we told you that you're going to develop resentment to the person for no response. But second, if you want to work to improve it, I don't know why the proximity principle plays any role in this, given that it was highly unnuanced. We suggest that you are going to work the relationships on either side because you want to value those relationships per their own analysis. The difference here is that you couldn't commit towards a romantic relationship. Before that, I'll take a point.
Why wouldn't you still face breakups if you engage in short-term relationships?
Even if you are engaged in short-term relationships, you aren't harmed as much. It's obviously a scale because you aren't committing towards the person. And this is for all the analysis that you guys gave. If you guys want to say we get to build that special bond, then breaking down that special bond is immensely worse for this person. So even if you have short-term casual relationships, that's far better because at the very least, each of those short-term casual relationships doesn't have as much of an emotional impact on you. Second issue is about other interpersonal relationships in their life. I want to directly respond to the idea of other relationships here. First, it's just like friends or family. So even if romance is a traditionally glorified lifestyle, this is something that the person didn't want. So what we said was, as more people are moving towards other forms of relationships, the idea of exclusion that romantic relationships have, that you need to be committed to one person. This is evidenced by the fact that the vast majority of relationships aren't with many partners, but with the exclusion of one. And the fact you have to spend lots of time into this one person, knowing that this one person is taking away time from you, because time that you could have otherwise gone to play sports or go to the bar means that you have less other relationships in your life. So if Vyasa wants to claim that smaller scale romantic relationships aren't something that's valuable, it's not clear as to why those things are likely to be as deemed of less importance. Because if this person has the proximity principle as their guiding light, then they value other relationships because they know every person they meet on the street may somehow be a potential person they can get close to. Every person they get close to at work may be someone who may become a potential friend or partner, which is why they can't have both things on either side. Third issue here, how about the chance they want to pursue romance in the future? This is important because romantic relationships are not static and are not time sensitive. So this is not to say that most people become perfectly rational actors at the age of 30, but their idea was it's very difficult to pursue people after the age of 30 because you have work. I think that's a good thing because it means you won't meet lots of other people, and the people you meet are those that are going to have that degree of permanence. We don't have to support either pursuing romantic relationships or not pursuing romantic relationships after the age of 30. The difference here is if you choose to pursue those romantic relationships after the age of 30, you are far more equipped to doing so because you know the people around your life have some stability, that it's not constantly volatile, and you are able to stick with those people as opposed to meeting new people all the time, and you don't know who's going to be your one true partner. At the end of this speech, we proved to you why romantic relationships came at the exclusion of other relationships, and why this person needed to prioritize themselves foremost. Propose.
Great. Thanks so much to the second opposition speaker for that very fine speech. Now calling on the second opposition speaker to extend the case for upbench. Here.
I prefer my POIs in chat. However, I also take then verbal POIs at the 6 minute. Let's start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think that propositions arguments are the ones that are really generic in terms of only explaining why relationships are bad in general, but not really explaining why then does it apply after the age of 30. We told you in Al's speech that getting hurt at a young age is so much better than getting hurt later on. This is something that they uniquely and conveniently didn't respond to. If we can prove that the harm that you get on that of only trying this at the age of 13 and then getting hurt even more causes you to lose even more happiness, then I think we already take this debate. The closest distinction on side of proposition from what's the difference between before the age of 30 and after the age of 30 is that people are drifting and are yet to form their identity. However, I think that it is fair to say that people already form their identity to a certain extent. Note that we're talking about people who are adults and are uniquely young, as said by my leader of opposition. This means that these people are oftentimes at least are in university or already have a job. This means that you already determine your future and already know your career path to a certain extent, which means that your future is not really drifting a lot anyway. We think that you are then also capable of growing together, understanding each other even more. But we also posit to you that even if it is drifting, this is most important. Because if you only meet after the person settled down, you do not know their stories when they are drifting. You do not know how they grew up. I think it is so important to grow together in that process, to be able to form stronger bonds, to know how they were before they formed this really huge mass, and to be able to fit into the society. You know how they grew up in that process. And this is what uniquely forms stronger bonds if you have it from a young age, and also no response from this. Before I go on, I want to clarify a few things first. Firstly, in terms of the proximity principle, we don't think that this is falling in love with everyone and anyone. If you love someone, even if you are proximate, I think that then it is still likely to form that bond with the person that you always spend time with, which notably is your partner. I think if proposition agrees that you spend more time with your partner on side of opposition, then this means that to some extent, they are the person that you are the closest with. Therefore, Umar's team then has to explain why you are likely to fall in love with other people who are less close and with less proximity on their side of the house. Furthermore, I don't think it's exclusive from any other relationships, because even if you spend time in your romantic relationship, note that as I said, you still spend time in your workspace to a certain extent. You do not bring your boyfriend or girlfriend or your partner to work. You still then have your friendship zones, because I think that oftentimes individuals do acknowledge this is something that they have to engage within, and this is something that brings them happiness. If it is true that not engaging with friends brings you unhappiness, this is the exact incentive as to why individuals will engage with their friends. I don't think there's a particular cause of you engaging within romantic relationships, since oftentimes having space for each other is also the means where you can have more better relationships. And I think that if you have friends, this then also strengthens your relationship, which is also then in the incentive of these individuals hoping for a really long-term relationship. With that being said, I want to tackle on the face of their case in terms of them saying that relationships are bad. But note that they still have to engage within relationships after the age of 30, and it is so much worse on their side of the house because of that. Proposition, Umar's team say that you might hurt the person that you once loved. Therefore, it is a moral harm. But no panel that this argument is so generic that it still exists at the age of 30. Therefore, they have to prove the exclusivity of this. It applies regardless of age. But we then argue that it applies more when you are older. Because note what LO told you that was not responded to, that at the age of 30, you are more busy. You have less rush for love. You have less creativity. You are less able to focus on romantic relationships. You are less able to commit because you then have other commitments that are already formed within your age, within your job. Because you're 30, you already then settled down. You're a lot more busier in terms of your job. This means that the ability for you to find someone else because you are lack of commitment is then even more on their side of the house. This is then worse and bad for their case. Because if their principle is that you don't want to hurt the person that you once loved, this means that you hurt the person more if you only then opt into that relationship after the age of 30. The counterfactual on our side of the house is having this friend, having this romantic partner from a young age when you're able to fully commit. This means that when you settle down at the older age, you already form that connection, which means that you're more likely to go further and less likely to hurt them. With that being said, I think we're able to flip the argument and claim this benefit. Furthermore, it is the only and best time to be able to have these relationships at a younger age. Oftentimes, after the age of 30, you are subjected to a lot of pressure by your work. This means that these individuals oftentimes do not have the mental capacity. They oftentimes then also are drifting a lot. I think they meet more people after the age of 30. After you are then settled down, when you need to engage with more customers, engage with more people. This is why oftentimes the instances of people having sex with people outside of marriage are after 30, because at that age, if you do not already form that bonds, this means that it is easier for you to drift out. But with that experience, you can also have more stable relationships in the future. This means that even if at worst where you fail, within that people at a young age are able to come back easier because younger people oftentimes still have the support of parents or their friendships to a certain extent comparatively. This means that you're then able to form better relationships when you're older, when you are 30 and having it better at that age. But it is worse on their side of the house. Because let's say that you don't have the experience and you only opt in at the age of 30 with no prior experience and no knowledge at all. It is more likely to fail because you do not have prior experiences, and people at that age expect you to already have that experience in the first place. Therefore, it is likely to be seen that you do not love them or is not committing enough, more than you are a newbie and do not have the experience compared to when you are younger. Older people oftentimes are also seen as less vulnerable and more mature. This means that the support structure that you have are then comparatively worse. This means that if propositions are so afraid of breakups and saying that this will then affect your productivity and affect your mental health, the harms are 10 times worse on their side of the house, which means that this harm then is uniquely more worse on their side of the house. I'll take Umar if you want.
So if a long-term romantic relationship was so special and you had to commit so much to it, why does that not come at the exclusion of other bonds you could potentially curate if this person did not exist as your partner?
Yeah, I think the extra effort and the opportunity cost that you need to spend after the age of 30 is then even worse because you have a lot of commitments. So if you want to spend time to only know someone at that age, this means that you're then needing to sacrifice even more compared to when you comparatively had more time, when you are then younger. Maybe you have an opportunity cost, but that opportunity cost is worse on yourself because you have to engage with the comparative. But furthermore, let's talk about the person's well-being and why then it is so important uniquely to have long-term relationships at this young age. I think that, as I said, you're often drifting. This is exactly why you want to find a sense of security and find someone to depend on. Note that I think that they are less likely to spend so much time if you do not deem this as a long-term relationship, because long-term relationship means that you want to work through it and you want to stay together for longer. I think on their side of the house, what you are more likely to do is to focus on other things, being focused on your friends, then giving up on your romantic relationship at their age. This means that even if you have casual relationships, it is unlikely to last and you are more likely to break up. Panel, I think that it is really important that you recognize what the context of this debate is. This context of this debate is not having romantic relationships until the age of 30. It is a comparison on whether it is good to start early or it's good to start late, which is what I hope proposition then will then engage in, but it's already too late after this because it's the whip speaker. With that being said, we're really proud to propose.
Great. Thanks so much to the second opposition speaker for that very fine speech. I now invite the third proposition speaker to wrap up the constructive part of Prop's case. Here.
Sorry. Am I audible?
Hi, yes, you're audible.
Okay. Setting up my timer. I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to do two things in my speech today. First, on clarifications and major rebuttals, and second, on the two main issues in today's debate. First, on casual relationships. On the side of proposition, we told you that romantic relationships were going to be something that took time away from other people. All the time you spent, for example, going on expensive dinner dates with your romantic lover, trying to spend quality time with your partner, making compromises and having to spend more time with them in order to account for their well-being, could have gone to spending more time with other friends or family that was going to be far more important and far more sustainable, because they did not operate on the idea of intensity and exclusivity the opposition has still yet to respond to. You could still gain the sort of benefits you would from a romantic relationship with a casual friendship with someone else with less of the harms, right? Second, on the age of 30 being a tipping point. We told you that the age of 30 becomes a tipping point because after the age of 30 would be when people have relative stability. We said specifically that we don't have to defend whether or not this person dates after age 30. What was important is that on either side, you have no prior experience, but the difference here is that as an older person, you no longer prioritize freedom and exploration as much. As an older person, you are not as keen as finding new relationships. And that's why we said that it would be fair to settle with age 30 as opposed to age 20 when you have no idea of what you really want to do, right? So let's take a trade off here. Even if we can never get a romantic relationship past age 30, we're going to be single forever. We said that that would be something we'll be okay with because this actor is going to prioritize having more of lots of different social relationships because of this knowledge of the proximity principle. They were not likely to prioritize like this sort of like long-term relationship for the happiness and well-being in the first place, right? Third, we told you that you would be able to develop a special bond for this person. Be engaged in both cases. Opposition's only mechanism as for why the romantic relationship would succeed was that you would be able to learn and grow together. We think that this is something that is extremely untrue and unproven at the same time because 20-year-olds are also going to be extremely busy and finding themselves just starting work or graduating university. We told you that this is not going to be enough of a mechanism for a successful romantic relationship and give you multiple structural reasons as to why you would fail, right? First, on resentment to your partner. Second, on your willingness to meet lots of new people. Proximity principle is one that means that obviously if you're going to be able to have more not romantic, but like relationships with others is obviously something you would want to opt into, given that you are someone who believes very strongly in this principle. And third, the fact that settling on one partner is going to become extremely difficult and stressful when it conflicts with your own like inbuilt principles, the fact that you should be meeting lots of other people, that you can gain relationships with all these other people, things that you lose when you gain a long-term relationship. We said that this is the deadlock breaker for why it's better to start early or start late. Given the proximity principle tells you that you may meet so many other people, it means that there's no idea of finding like a soulmate, or for example, like your one true love, as they like to say in like, I don't know, movies or like in like societal narratives, right? It means that you don't know who this special person is going to be. You're always going to meet new people. You're always going to engage with others. You're always going to make new connections, find other people, and you would find someone that's new. We say that because of this knowledge, you only hurt yourself and hurt the other partner. You're going to opt into this romantic relationship, knowing that it's not likely to succeed. And at any point, you could meet someone else who could be worth far more to you. Past the age of 30, at the very least, your life is going to be far more stable and you become more rational once you truly have that time to self-actualize and understand your preferences. We think that is obviously something is going to be true. At the age of 30, you would be more mature than you were at the age of 20. You would have more of your life figured out. You would have more of your relationship stabilized to the point where you would be more comfortable into entering a romantic relationship, even in spite of this principle. But the key issues of this debate. One, our romantic relationship is going to necessarily be a net good. They told us that you were going to fall in love regardless, and for example, be upset needing to uphold your personal boundaries. And they said it would be due to things like human nature or societal narratives to find someone to curb your loneliness, right? We told you that social norms were not something that affects every single person, even in other situations, right? Like if everyone around you is going to be doing something, it doesn't mean that you have to do that specific thing. You are still able to have your own individuality and your own choices and wanting to do things that make you happy. Hence, it's specifically in this scenario where you have life principles of operating by the proximity principle, we proved to you that this person was unlikely to place a high priority on long-term romantic relationships in the first place. So even if this was going to be a societal narrative, this person would have the obvious choice to stray away from it, do what would make them happy instead of doing what everyone else would say. never analyzed and gave us reasons why our romantic relationship was necessarily going to be good either. Neither side can claim that we know the exact outcome of this relationship. But at the very least, we gave you reasons as to why our relationship could be harmful in 3 stages, right? The process of finding it, the process of the relationship itself, and the process of ending it. We told you that relationships at a young age was something that was going to limit your choices in a time where you were trying to find yourself and don't even understand what you want to do in life, right? You have to sacrifice your time in the other relationships you have for this person. You take on the burden to upkeep someone else's emotions, because when people become a couple, their emotions become one, right? You have to shoulder the burden of having to like share your emotions with this person, while at the same time, the proximity principle dictates that you should be able to be free and for new connections with whoever you want, right? We didn't tell you that this would lead to resentment. When you acknowledge the proximity principle, you know you could be strengthening or making these other connections, but you are unable to do so because your relationship restricts you. And we told you this is why it would be so harmful when you don't only hurt yourself in the relationship process, but your partner as well, right? So knowing that the proximity principle was true, you would be less likely to want the exclusivity that a relationship demands, meaning you cannot cater to your partner who is willing to devote themselves to you, or you will never be able to feel the same way because you are entrenched by this proximity principle. It's internalized, and your relationship would be unlikely to be sustainable in the first place. When, as we told you, you begin to resent needing to be burdened and tied down when you actually wish you could be making these connections with other people and having more freedom than you would be in this long-term relationship, right? And so we told you when this relationship is likely to end, the individual is going to be faced with another host of issues, being dragged down by the past, having to deal with the fallout from this relationship, losing another special relationship that could have just been a connection, but they made into something that could harm them in the long run. We told you that it goes against the incentives of the young adult who believes so strongly in this principle to take this risk, right? We told you that if the person believes that they could not find the one at such a young age, it will be a waste of effort to do so and conform to societal narratives that told them you needed this relationship to be fulfilled. So the happiness of the individual. Opposition says that people have more choice on their side. I just don't think this is true. Just because you have more choices on your side, even if we take this, doesn't mean that you should pursue it because you know yourself that it would be bad for you. For example, yes, maybe eating chocolate every day would allow you to gain select moments of happiness, but you personally know it's bad for your health and you have a lack of self-control, so you would be likely to refrain from it. People restrict themselves from many different things because they know they would have an adverse reaction to it specifically. Thus, as a young adult who knows they want to live by this principle and doesn't want to tie down to someone else, obviously it's something you do for yourself, right? As for regret on not pursuing relationships and failure, it is unclear as to why the relationship was going to be the end-all be-all self-actualization. Opposition did not prove why you needed the exclusive relationships in order to achieve their happiness. Who this person wouldn't prioritize this in the first place, and you could gain fulfillment through, for example, having short-term relationships or having like, I don't know, any sort of things to make you happy, like hobbies, etc., etc. Like we told you that this is something that this person wasn't going to prioritize specifically because they live at the proximity principle. You don't have to take this person's happiness as something that would be true for everyone else, right? We also told you that the process of searching for the relationship itself, something that would become a huge emotional and mental burden for you. We told you that the proximity principle was not something that this person could opt in and out of. It would be a lesson that they internalize, live by, and execute in their daily lives. Hence, it will be seen as a blanket principle which covers all of their relationships. So if this person is unable to opt out to what is that entrenched in their psychology, they would always think of what they lost out on and what could be if they had not committed to this long-term relationship, right? So why really become this person's breaking point? It's why they should start dating others long term. Told you before the age of 30 that it's undeniable that this individual is going to be attacked with all sorts of life changes. They will go through many institutional changes, like advancing their career and experience freedom for the first time. At this point, sure, the person can think they have a grasp of their lives, but if they can't even figure out their work-life balance and they're losing grasp on their friends, I don't think that this would be like prime time for them to commit to relationships, right? So when relationships like our commitment that directly conflicts the proximity people, I think it's an obvious and deadly move to participate in a relationship you know will not maximize your happiness. And for the final part where Op says you are better able to bounce back from relationships when you were younger, I don't think that dating experience would equate to you being a better dater. And I think that not all childhood experiences are something that gives you real experiences, right? But about you had to reject someone you fell in love with. We say that that's also fine because the temporary pain now is going to be far better than experiencing far more intense pain in the future when you allow this emotional burden to build up when the fall of the relationship is even worse. And for the proposition, this person has far more agency and far more happiness when they are not tied down to a singular partner. But I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much to the third proposition speaker for that very fine speech. Now calling on the third opposition speaker to wrap up the constructive part of the debate and the constructive part of Op's case. Here.
Give me a second to submit. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think the biggest problem of our proposition is that none of the arguments are mutually exclusive. This looks like the major harms pointed out from the previous two speakers, the harms of losing time spending on a partner, the harms of not having enough resources, or the harms of being in tremendous sadness because you just went through a breakup. We see this is not mutually exclusive for a few reasons. Number one, time is not mutually exclusive because you have to spend time with your partner after your 30s as well. And you probably would be having a job by then as well, which means you probably would have to trade off your jobs for your partners as well in 30. And the motion itself also suggests that if the partner is considering whether they want to commit now or commit in the future, it means that they will commit regardless. They will want to be in this relationship regardless, right? Secondly, on resources, we say resources is also not mutually exclusive because it also means that you have to spend, like if you want to spend expensive dinners with your partner, you'll probably do so after 30s as well, right? But lastly, in terms of sadness, we thought this is the first speaker that sadness was never exclusive because like feeling sad in relationship is inevitable. It just feels like has lesser sadness. We say sadness is probably like comparatively lesser on ours of the house because insofar as we spend time, at least like we spend time knowing the partner, we don't reject them at the end of the day, or like we don't end up living in regrets. We think sadness is lesser, but sadness is still comparatively like somewhat similar on both sides as well. But now moving on towards a few responses in this debate. The first thing here is that the constant question is, why is romantic relationship important, right? We think it's not about whether romantic relationship is important. It's not a generic motion, it's active motion. The motion suggests that this partner has an interest of entering the relationship after 30. This suggests that to some extent the actor does prioritize relationship. The actor does want to be in a relationship, or the actor probably sees relationship as something that like emotionally fulfilling in life. Just because he knows about the proximity principle doesn't stop him from like acknowledging that relationship is one that probably brings fulfillment or like something that brings meaning to his life, right? Therefore, we have to debate in charitable grounds here in that this actor is probably interested in relationship and have some sort of devotion towards relationship or have a high interest entering relationship, but he's just considering on whether or not like they're just considering on whether or not they want to enter it now or later, right? Thus, it's true that it proves that they will still unconsciously prioritize relationship regardless in this context. It's just when they would want to act on it, right? We also told you that there are a few reasons why they're also likely going to want to prioritize relationship, such as biological, which wasn't really like responded to except for Umar's one-liner saying that like, it doesn't universally affect anyone. So like some people might feel biological, some people might not. And like since we can't really determine how the actor feels, therefore I don't think that this is a sufficient response, right? But moving on, let me just deal with like. But also, we also say that the reason why people want to enter relationships right now and will not want to restrain themselves is also because of things like peer pressure. But also, moving on to like the harms of relationships, like the harms of relationship. That's our proposition proposed, right? So the few things that they say. Number one, they say you're setting up yourself for failure because relationship for some reason was going to fail, but now prove to us why it was going to fail in the end, right? We flip against that even if it was going to fail, we say it's worse on their side of the house. Why is that so? Because this motion suggests that you have a proximity, but it doesn't suggest that like you do not have connections with someone, like because we already I'll prove to you why you're going to have feelings for someone regardless, right? With this line of logic, you're going to have feelings for someone, but it's whether or not you want to act on it now or later. If you act on it later, it's harmful because now you lose out on the process of actively getting to know this person better. You will lose out on the process of getting to connect with this person better, and you start connecting after your 30s, which supposedly it's a little too late because because like a normal person probably takes years trying to get to know a person. A normal person probably takes like years and years to get to know whether this person is someone they want to be for the rest of their life, right? So they lose out on the process of getting to know, and we think it's harmful. It's comparatively more harmful from their side of the house because on their side, you're more likely going to stray away your love. You're more likely unable to commit by the time you reach 30, right? Because by the time you already lose out on the like process building of connections, you already lose out on the like a lot of things, and you're also potentially your partner will like have a change of stance because like you say it's subjective. Therefore, not all partners want to like commit after 30. Some partners probably want to get married after like 20. Some partners probably have a change of stance by the time you keep like dragging it on, right? So by the end of the day, you're more likely to feel like a sense of regret the moment that the person you love leaves you at the end of the day, right? But furthermore, we also say that the reason why this is harmful they also say the reason why this is harmful because apparently you have no time money. I already proved to you why this is not mutually exclusive. But furthermore, we also say that like relationship as a whole just doesn't hinder job, right? We say that like you do not need to like spend your entire day with your partner. You can just spend like the nights with your partners, right? A few like 1 or 2 hours with your partners. You do not need to spend like expensive dinners with your partner. You just need like can just go out like a walk on the park and things like that. But we say it's also more harmful on their side of the house because you lose out on the process to actively grow together because you're not willing to spend time to know each other in the present and you only spend your like you only want to commit after 30. We say by the time it's too late because your partner just cannot wait for you at the end of the day. By the time you want to like get to know them, by the time they are 30, they probably like they probably had feelings for someone else or they probably just like just opted out of this relationship because you took too long to wait, right? We think these are things that are uniquely the harms that are way worse on their side of the house insofar as you will continue waiting for this relationship to progress or insofar as you continue waiting after your 30s, right? Okay, I'll take one POI if there's any.
So the benefits you propose are only valuable if this person enters the romantic relationship. We don't lose out any time with your partner if we never get together with them in the first place. The thing that you are certain to lose is time with everyone else, and you prioritize normal friendships over romantic relationships because you know the proximity principle means you're going to meet many people over your lifetime.
Okay, this is premised upon the fact that you do not have feelings for a partner. But we already give you like 5 structural reasons on why it's inevitable for you to fall for a certain person, right? Because of this reason, you're likely going to have feelings for this certain person, regardless of the proximity principle that you feel. And because that you have like feelings for this like person, right? It's then it becomes a debate on whether or not you want to act on these feelings. You never prove to us on why it's likely that this person wouldn't like have feelings for this person or why like this person would likely not have feelings. Moreover, the motion already suggests that this person probably like prioritizes romantic relationship or it's like just like sees it as something that brings meaning to their life, right? Because of this very reason, this person probably has some sort of romantic interest for them, right? And it's about whether or not they want to act. We say this is harmful for them because like you lose out on time getting to know that person or you lose out on time like getting to form meaningful connections with that person and you end up with regret because by the time you reach 30 it's too late. We say this is like uniquely towards our side and this is not like this is uniquely only present on our side of the house because only on our side of the house we can form better relationship in the long run. We can prevent like the actor from regretting because they didn't opt into like a better relationship, right? We say on our side of the house because of the fact that we're able to acknowledge our feelings, we're able to acknowledge that we feel something for this person, we're able to act on it and to spend like 1 or 2 hours every day trying to get to know that person better. We say we're less likely to live in regret in the next 30 years because then we feel like at the very least we acted on someone we like or like we acted on someone that we're really close to and we want to develop feelings with. But also on our side of the house, we also prevent like going into relationship only when you're 30s and then realizing that the person that you have been waiting for like 30 years of your life isn't someone that you really want to be. At least on our side of the house, we get to opt out of it like faster compared to you only doing so after like 10 years of waiting, right? On our side of the house, the harms is comparatively like lesser compared to yours and therefore side with side opposition. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much to the third opposition speaker for that very fine speech and for what has been a very constructive debate so far. Now calling on op reply to wrap up the op case completely. Here.
Wait, start my speech. In my speech, I will firstly burden push the side of proposition and ask them to defend the counterfactual. Then secondly, I will engage with the best case scenario on whether relationships on yourself is good or not. But I think that we've already explained why the possibility for you to engage in relationships are very likely after 30, which means that I do have to then engage with the possible harms of also existing under their side of the house. This means that if it is possible that you engage in relationships after 30, you are still having the same harms of breakup, still having the same harms of spending time on side of proposition. The only defense they have is to say that maybe you will not find a partner, therefore you might not get into a relationship. But this doesn't negate the high possibility of what we've already explained to you. But the same logic then applies to our case as well. If you do not find a partner at a young age, you wouldn't get into a relationship either. Therefore, I think this is an unsuccessful shift from them from like drifting away from defending their own burden. With that being said, let's go on to the first question. What if you're likely to date after 30? We've explained why this is likely. Firstly, due to hormones. Secondly, because you want to settle down. Thirdly, this is a unique form or sense of security that one person and one person only cares for you and are willing to be there for you. Unlike friends who always change and do not need that much of effort as they themselves said, and are not as intimately close, and you do not spend so much time on your friends comparatively that they say that you will not sacrifice your career if you only have friends. This means that the unique thing, as they considered, is then really something that's only attainable in the form of relationships. We've also explained the biological one, to have a partner that you can be physically intimate and do other things with, that's only existent on our side of the house. These are the reasons as to why you're likely to engage within relationships after the 30. Even if these are not likely, I think that that person then is also considering, based on the societal norms, to know that this is really likely for you to engage in relationships after the 30 because everyone else is doing that. I think that on the basis of that expectation of an average human being, this person probably wants to have a better life and better relationship after the life of 30. So which side then has a better life after the age of 30? And which side has more happiness on that? We've told you firstly, the breakups are even worse when you're at the age of 30. This means that it could have been better, it could have been less heartbreaking if you did it at this age of 20 because you have comparatively more support structures. And then people then oftentimes view you as more vulnerable, view you as newbies. They will not have such high expectations on you. The net amount of happiness is lesser on our side of the house. Whereas on proposition, when you break up at the age of 30, this means that it will be significantly worse because then you have less support structure and people already view you as being matured, as proposition themselves say. This means that the net amount of suffering is worse on their side of the house. We've also explained why you're left to commit even more at that age, because oftentimes you settle down, you're more busy with your work. They say that you can also be busy at 20, yeah, sure, but the point is that you will be more busy when you are 30. This means that you're unlikely to be able to form meaningful relationships. This ties back to that actor, even if they have this proximity principle, since oftentimes people then do want to plan for a future or then want to have happiness in general. Therefore, the net gain of this debate is which side then prevents suffering even more. And I think that it is more likely that this person wants to prepare and wants to then prepare to prevent the sufferings when you engage in relationships at the age of 30. But even if you don't buy that, Josh, let's engage with whether relationships in and of itself is good, assuming that you will be single for life, which is really unlikely since there was no analysis coming from side of proposition. They say you take away time from other stuff, but I don't think they prove why it is exclusive that friends give you happiness either ways. At most, what they prove is that you can also get happiness from your friends. Therefore, I think that what we're able to prove here is that relationships then are also a form of happiness. But what them uniquely prove, which they didn't engage in, is that you wanting to opt into this relationship and your partner wanting to opt into this relationship. The only reason as to why you would want to opt into a relationship is because you love that person so much at that moment. What they're doing aside proposition is actively disengaging themselves from this actor just on the virtue of this belief. Panel, I think that you will not feel that you will be bounded by this relationship because on the virtue that they assume that we spend a lot of time with our partner means that we will be the most proximate and love this person the most and commit the most and to be able to sustain long-term relationships. On that basis, we urge you to side with opposition.
Great, thanks so much to the opposition reply for a very fine speech. Now calling on the proper reply to wrap up the prop case, the debate as a whole.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Romantic love had the unique power to heal and nurture, but it also had the power to corrupt and destroy. The structure of this speech is very simple. I want to talk about 3 strategic failures of the opposition team case, why this is glaring and why they have to lose the debate. First is on their lack of understanding of the proximity principle. The squirrel we heard was that the proximity principle meant that you form bonds with people you spend more time with. We said that this meant that you formed far more close interpersonal relationships with people outside of your partner, and which is why this individual person isn't equipped to deal with those scenarios. So the reason as to why this applies for this actor was that the proximity principle meant it was always on your mind about the fact that you could form potential relationships with others. The fact that you spending time with someone else who isn't your partner means eventually you may develop feelings for them. That uncertainty was what made this actor unfit for potential romantic relationships, and that is why this proximity principle matters. They did not engage in this. Second, it was their unwillingness to take a trade-off, because Op Whip's uncharitable response was, you will be sad anyway. You will spend money anyway. If this is true, then there's nothing to gain from romantic relationships. Every time they try to wash it out, it reduces their impact. We were willing to agree that maybe romantic relationships are high reward, but they were extremely high risk too. And given that this person was in a volatile state of their life, where you're constantly evolving as someone under the age of 30, it wasn't fair to us to put that high reward on a pedestal, because it was far easier for you to prioritize the stability you had right now. Third, it was their constant assertion that you will fall in love anyways. So note, I still don't know why this person has an expressed preference for finding love after the age of 30, because presumably there may be societal coercions towards that, but you as a person were able to shield yourself from societal coercion. A, because you were as an actor in control of this motion and we are able to prove that, but B, because the knowledge of the proximity principle meant that you could distance yourself from other narratives because you knew that other narratives made you live far worse lives. So the only reason you developed such a deep bond and you love them so much is because you chose to pursue them. In a world where you know that the potential failure may condemn you to a life of misery, is a world where you never develop that potential feeling to begin with. So even if you have an initial crush on someone, maybe you would like them a little bit because of their appearance or their personality, you choose to not pursue that further. So it doesn't mean you lose anything because you never had that relationship in the very first place. 3 issues. First, are romantic relationships a net good? They say that this actor wants a romantic relationship. They can give us all the nebulous and dreamy rhetoric of why a partner is so amazing and wonderful, but we all know the truth that this was ultimately a lie. Because what we explained here was that romantic relationships may be good for generic people, that this person with the knowledge that they may fall in love with someone else, they could not commit to this because it was going to hurt themselves and hurt the partner they so wanted to cherish. So on both levels, you weren't able to develop that relationship in the first place. Second, will this romantic relationship work? So I want to know why prop takes the advantage here, because we win on strategy, we engage with both possible cases. First, if the relationship failed, their only mechanism for why it would succeed was that we have feelings because hormones and we can grow together. But it's no secret that majority of romantic relationships perish. You reject people all the time. The difference here is that if you break up with someone with a romantic relationship long-term opposed to a casual one, is that you may feel sadness, but it's varying degrees of sadness. If you put all of your life into one person and you know that this person took away time from my other relationships, that's when you feel far more sadness. So all the far more happiness they wanted to get under their side implicitly concedes our benefit as well. But second, their response is that you feel extreme amounts of regret because you never got with Brian from your high school. What's the comparative? On their side, they felt far more regret because you knew the proximity principle told you that yes, I am someone who had prevented all the heartbreak from beginning with. But under our side, you could justify yourself. This is the deadlock breaker about I never entered that romantic relationship because I knew it could ruin me, as opposed to you not listening to your own self under the side of opposition. If the relationship succeeded in their best case, we told you why it came at the exclusion of others. But third, on the age of 30, I want to be very, very clear about this. They think things you can marry someone after the age of 30. I think their rhetoric is highly ignorant to suggest people cannot find love after the age of 30. But in the worst case, we're going to trade that off because you as the person between the ages of 20 to 30 should be free to explore your life as much as possible. You can sleep with whoever you want as long as it doesn't tie you down and confine yourself to a single person that may one day break your heart. The finals of Nationals WSDC for 2 years in a row has been about romantic relationships. The prop has won last year. We will win this year as well.
Great, thanks so much to the proper class for that very fine speech. And thank you everyone for what was a very lovely debate. You may have virtually across the house. As for the members of the panel, it would actually be super cool if we could jump over